And welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and this is my Commander Masters review. Something that I've actually never done before on my channel is just do a review of a whole set. But, you know, as these cards were coming out, I was sort of thinking how I was going to handle this. I can't really do a top 10 cards or top commanders or anything like that because there wasn't enough new stuff, I think, to cover all of that. So I thought, well, I'll just do a review overall talking about everything. I mean, it's kind of a weird one. Honestly, I was pretty excited about this set coming out. I thought there was going to be lots of stuff to talk about. I haven't really made any videos at all about it. I've only made just the one. So it was kind of weird. I really wasn't sure what to say. There was obviously a lot of reprints. That was most of it. Obviously, I'm going to break up this review and do certain parts. I'm going to talk about the reprints, and then I'm going to talk about the newer cards as well. Some of the new commanders we got. We did get some new commanders. So we'll start with the reprints. First of all, I will just say I made a video about 3 weeks, maybe a month ago, talking about reprints that I think the commander format desperately needs, and specifically cards that have actually never been reprinted, which is shocking because they are commander staples, and commander sets are the perfect spot for those cards to get reprinted in. So I thought for sure, Commander Masters, we're going to get a bunch of them. I had 10 cards I talked about there. And I did get one, Blood Chief Ascension. This is one of the cards I talked about, and they actually did reprint it. It's been a commander staple since forever. I mean, since before I've been playing the format. Obviously, it's a fantastic card in a commander game. It is extra good in certain strategies, but you could put it in any deck and it's going to do a ton of work for you. It's just one of those cards that when you see it in a commander game, you're just, I got to get this off the table immediately. And, you know, I don't have this in any decks. I've never used this card in any of my decks personally. It's just a card that, you know, being unbiased, I think, why wouldn't you just reprint this card, right? It's the only one we got, though. Out of all those cards I talked about on this list, and there was a bunch of really great commander staples that I think needed reprints. A little bummed about that, but at least I got one. As you would expect, we got some prototypical commander staple reprints, like Doubling Season, I guess, is a pretty good one that a lot of people are excited about. Another one I talked about in that video was Parallel Lives. That was actually my number one because I can't believe that card hasn't been reprinted. Why are they so against reprinting that card? I don't get it. Obviously, it goes in a ton of decks. Doubling Season probably goes in more decks. However, it's, you know, if you're in the token theme, you can only put one Doubling Season in your deck, right? You probably want a Doubling Season and a Parallel Lives. So the fact that like they've been reprinting Doubling Season quite a bit, right? They've reprinted that card quite a few times in the last few years now. So maybe it's Parallel Lives' turn, right? We got a few decent land cycles. Again, not anything I'm too excited about. Not great. We did get the Battle Bond lands, that's a pretty good reprint, I would say, as far as lands go. They are a little pricey. Just did my lands video. They're right up there. You know, if I'm making any deck, two color for sure, maybe even a 3-color deck, they're pretty much an auto include for me. That's a pretty good reprint as far as lands go, but not really a whole lot else. We got the usual suspects, right? What we would always get reprinted in commander sets. Heroic Intervention, you know, like I'm just picking out cards here that you would kind of expect, you know, at this rate. Heroic Intervention, of course, is a card that you could throw in any deck. If I have a green deck, it's going in there. And it's one of those cards that it's getting to the point now where it's been reprinted almost in every commander set, and it's still kind of expensive, but you know, it's just like with Sol Ring, right? Sol Ring was one of those cards that in the beginning, it was super expensive. Everyone did not have a Sol Ring in their commander deck because it was actually a really expensive card because, of course, it's really old and really rare. And then they just kept reprinting it in literally every single commander set and a whole bunch of other stuff as well. And they just printed it into oblivion to the point where it became affordable. And that's likely what they might start doing with cards like Heroic Intervention or cards like Smothering Tithe, right? Again, this is a card that, man, they've been reprinting this a lot lately, and I'm just thinking there's so much complaining about Smothering Tithe, and I imagine, you know, in the beginnings of Commander, when it started to gain popularity, a lot of people, again, probably did a lot of complaining about Sol Ring because they wanted it in their deck, and because it was so expensive, they couldn't. And Smothering Tithe is one of those cards that a lot of people complain about because it's so powerful, but you complain a lot less if you have it in your own decks, right? Smothering Tithe, I'm just saying, could be the new Sol Ring, where they just keep printing it and printing it and printing it and printing it until it is like a $2 card, and then everyone can afford to throw in all their decks, which I don't necessarily think is a good thing, right? Demonic Tutor, that's another one. Again, another card that, of course, it's the best tutor there is, I think, in the entire game of Magic. And it's likely that they will just keep printing this and printing this and printing this until it's very affordable for any commander deck, right? I think that's kind of where they're going with this. The cycles that people are particularly excited about, the medallion cycle, they were printed in this set, which is okay. That's definitely, I got the medallions in my monocolor decks. I think medallions are really, really good in monocolor decks because, of course, essentially all of your spells are going to be one cheaper. In a two-color deck, I wouldn't find the room. That's just me. I mean, maybe people do put these in the two-color decks. I don't know if you put them in any decks beyond that, but I think they're really good in monocolor decks, which is why, you know, for me, it is a good reprint, even though I don't personally need them myself. Obviously, they're kind of expensive. So again, a good reprint in that they are sought-after cards in the Commander format, but also kind of expensive. The big one, though, I think that everyone is super excited about is the Ikoria free spell cycle, Fierce Guardianship, and, Deadly Rollick, Deflecting Swat, right? The kind of cards that you would put in any commander deck if you were playing those colors. Of course, Fierce Guardianship being, I would say, at the top of the mountain there, which you could make the argument it's the best counterspell in the format. For sure. I definitely wouldn't argue the case if somebody was to say that. I probably would agree. They're expensive, obviously. They're very sought after. These are the cards that are going to be kind of the chase cards, I think, from this set. And I think a lot of people might run out and buy these just with the hopes of cracking a Fierce Guardianship in a pack. Go nuts if that's your thing. I'm not going to do that. And I'll just say price is one thing that I haven't really mentioned at all, but a whole lot of other people have. So everything I'm saying here, because obviously these packs, these boxes and all this stuff are more expensive from what I've heard. I haven't bought a box of cards in forever. Ravnica, actually, funny enough, the original Ravnica City of Guilds is the last time I bought a box of cards. So I don't really follow the prices that much. I mostly just buy singles. So how many people are going to go out there and buy a box? Apparently they're really expensive. Are you going to be able to crack open a Fierce Guardianship? Even if you do, is it going to be worth it? So everything that I'm saying here in this video, whether it be, negative or positive, you also have to take into consideration the price of these boxes, which is more expensive than they normally are, right? This cycle of cards for sure, I think, is going to be the one thing that gets Commander players to want to run out there, though, and grab some of these boxes with the hopes of cracking these. That's my guess anyway, because they are obviously sought after, expensive, and very usable in pretty much any commander deck. As far as the reprints that I'm kind of excited about, I really like Personal Tutor. I already talked about this in that reprint video, and this is one, this for me is a good reprint. I know a lot of people don't love tutors in the commander format, but I think they are needed. You do really need them. And this is a good one. This is a reprint that I like. It's obviously only getting sorceries, and it's doing it at sorcery speed, so it is a powered down version of a mystical tutor, which is what I like. This is a very limited tutor, in my opinion. So if you have a deck where, first of all, you can just go get a board wipe with this, which is great. Also, if you have a deck that just has that sorcery that's really important to you, you can go get that as well. So that's why I like cards like this as reprints. I also like it because it's a really old card originally from Portal 3 Kingdoms, and those are the kind of cards that I like to see reprinted. Speaking of which, my favorite reprint from this set is Loyal Retainers. This is definitely a card that I think is a great, it's one that I would never have thought of, right? Again, when I made my video, I would have included this, but I just didn't think of it. Another card originally from Portal that, it's a great card in the commander format because, of course, you sacrifice it, return target legendary creature from your graveyard to the battlefield, activate only during your turn before attackers are declared. And it's funny, if somebody reads that on this card and they've never seen it before, they're like, why did they put that on there? That's just something they did in Portal. For some reason, all of the abilities, some of the commanders even originally from that set, they put that on there. I don't know why. They had a lot of weird things they did in that set. Activate only during your turn before attackers are declared is one of those things that they put on there. So they just stuck with it. So got to use it on your turn before attackers are declared. So on your, I guess, first main phase, essentially. But it's a great card, obviously. Fits in pretty much any commander deck. I have this in my AO deck because obviously I want my commander to be dying and getting it back very easily. This is one of the best ways to get your commander back out of the graveyard in the commander format. And we got new art, new border, all that kind of stuff. Like all of that plays into it as well. This is probably my favorite reprint from the set. I don't know if I'm going to run out there and grab it, but it's probably my favorite reprint. I think the only card that I might actually go run out and grab is this Obscuring Haze, just because I really like the art. This is a really cool looking card. I actually don't even have this in any deck. I have Obscuring Haze in 0 decks currently, but it does fit really nicely into my Questing Beast deck. It is a card I've considered for that deck before. And, you know, I'm a huge art guy, as I've said many times before. And when I see a card that just looks really, really cool like this, and I don't even like borderless cards either, actually. I don't use borderless cards typically, but this card just looks really, really cool. And so, you know, maybe, maybe not. I'll see what the price is at. Again, maybe a lot of other people want this. It is one of those free spells, although it is the, you know, at the bottom as far as sought after cards go. You know, this I say with for sure this is the one that people least go after. Still though, really cool looking. People might want to run out and grab this. If it's not too expensive, I might get my hands on it myself, just because I really like the cool alternate art. Alternate art's a big thing for me, and I think again, especially when you're doing reprints for sets, that's a big one. And that's one I don't think they did enough here. I just talked about the Lord of the Rings set, which of course just came out before this, which had a ton of great Commander reprints. And they did the original art. I just got my Farhaven elves in the mail because I'm like, man, I use Farhaven elf in a bunch of decks. Phenomenal new art. It looks great. So I ordered a bunch just to replace the ones I already have in my decks because I just think they look cool. So if you're going to be doing reprints, why not do that? And with the Lord of the Rings set, they did a bang up job. Not only did they pick a bunch of cards that are great reprints for the Commander format. In fact, I would argue that the reprints from the Lord of the Rings set are better than the ones from this set, which isn't saying much about this set, right? And then on top of that, they also did the alternate art, right? Well Lost Dreams is another one. I have that card in my Patron of the Kitsune deck, and I really like the way the new one looks, so I ordered it just to replace the one I already have. You know, if you're gonna do a reprintless set like this, why not do more original art? They didn't do a lot. They did some. I'll just say a lot of people have talked about the, you know, side profile commanders, whatever you want to call it. My take on it, this Mikius the Unhallowed looks fantastic. I love the art. Really great art. What I don't like is that weird plain blue background. Why did they do that? I don't like that at all. That's very weird. That really takes away from it for me. The art's fantastic, but why the plain background? Neheb the Eternal, this is another one that the art looks great. I think that the actual profile picture there looks fantastic, but then you just have this plain orange matte background. Again, this is a purely aesthetic thing. Maybe some people like it, maybe some people don't. I think I've probably heard more negative things about it than positive things. Again, for me, the background, and some of them was like pink. You got like a green card with a bright pink background. That's very weird. Some people might like it. For me, not my thing for sure. Overall, the reprints in this set, not great. Not great. To me, again, I think probably Lord of the Rings, which we just got, had better reprints than this set did. Again, I ran out and bought a bunch of cards from that set that I wanted personally. This set, I don't know, might not get any. Let's talk about the original cards from this set, right? The brand new cards that we got, the cards that we've never seen before. And of course, those came out in the precons, for which there is 4. I talked about Ruka Biologist. That is the one card I've talked about during the whole spoiler scenario. And it was the only one that I thought was worth talking about. It was the only one really worth making a video about immediately, I thought. Again, if you want to see my thoughts on that, go check out that video. I won't harp on it. I don't love the precons, okay? I'll just say that. And the reason why is because they're very archetype specific. So for example, the 5-color Sliver deck, all the new cards we got are either Sliver Tribal, which you're only going to use in a Sliver Tribal deck. So who's going to want that, right? Only the people that are playing Sliver Tribal. Or they are, you know, there's a few cards that are very tribal specific. We got the Planeswalker deck, right? Which all of that stuff is Planeswalker specific. So if you're not doing any Planeswalker stuff, you're probably not going to be using any of those cards, right? So because of these precons are super archetype specific, you're probably not going to be going after them unless you have a deck that is using that, right? Like Leori, Spark Touched Hunter, blue, red, and a white elemental cat 3/3, flying vigilance. Whenever Leori, Spark Touched Hunter deals combat damage to a player, choose a Planeswalker type. So of course that means the name of a certain Planeswalker. Until end of turn, whenever you activate an ability of a Planeswalker of that type, copy that ability. You may choose new targets for the copy. So I guess if you're in a Planeswalker deck that is red, white, and blue, this is going to be a great fit. Obviously, it can also be your commander, so you can do that. I mean, I don't even know what to say. There's nothing to say about this. Planeswalker Tribal, right? That again, that's one of the reasons I don't love the precons is because they're so archetype specific. There's almost nothing to say. If you want to build a Jeskai Planeswalker or Super Friends deck, here's a commander for you, I guess. That's it. What else is there to say, right? Not much. Narcy Fablesinger. 1 white, black, and a green human bard 3/3. This is one that when I first saw it, I thought, okay, I was kind of excited about it because I saw all these spoilers coming out and I wasn't really getting excited about any of the cards I was seeing, not any of the new ones anyway. And I thought, okay, well here, finally a interesting commander. 3/3 with lifelink. Whenever you sacrifice an enchantment, draw a card. I was like, oh wow, that's an interesting build around. Yeah, we could find some enchantments that are sacrificing themselves, and then you get a draw. It's sort of an interesting, weird theme that we've never seen before. But then I read that second ability. Whenever the final chapter ability of a saga you control resolves, each opponent loses X life, and you gain X life, where X is its mana value. And I was like, oh. And that sort of got me less excited about it because now, oh, we're just doing, I had forgotten, right? When I read that first ability, I was like, oh yeah, they sacrifice themselves when they resolve the last chapter. So of course, you're just going to do that, right? This is just another Saga Tribal commander that everyone's going to be using sagas in and probably not really doing anything else. So funny enough, that last ability actually makes me less excited about this commander because you're just going to be doing that, right? And again, if you're doing the Tom Bombadil 5-color deck, it's going to go in the 99 obviously as well, right? So these commanders, to me, a lot of these precon commanders are just such obvious build-arounds that it just makes it not really exciting. I have zero interest in building any of these decks, to be quite honest. Not even for my channel. For myself, of course, I wouldn't, but I'm not even going to build any of these decks for my channel because I just have zero interest. You're just going to put all the sagas in there. That's it. That's all you're going to do in this deck. Maybe a few other things like Ephemerate Enchantress. There you go. There's a unique old card that you're going to want to throw in your Narcy deck. Ephemerate Enchantress, great fit in that deck. Other than that, it's like, okay, you're just doing a lot of the same stuff. And the same goes for the cards in the 99, right? Gatewatch Beacon, 2 and a white artifact. Enters the battlefield with 3 loyalty counters on it, taps to add a white. Whenever a Planeswalker enters the battlefield under your control, if Gatewatch Beacon has loyalty counters on it, you may move a loyalty counter from Gatewatch Beacon onto that Planeswalker. So we know where this is going, right? Again, there's nothing to talk about here. Nothing. If you have a Planeswalker commander, which I think there's a couple that are white, this can easily go in there. If you're playing a Traxa Super Friends deck or any Super Friends deck in white, you're going to play it. Not very exciting, not really much to talk about. Demon of Fate's Design is kind of, it's a little interesting, okay? So 4 black, demon, 6/6 flying trample. Once during each of your turns, you may cast an enchantment spell by paying life equal to its mana value rather than paying its mana cost. So if you are in that black deck that is doing enchantment tribal, that is making this a little more niche, I guess. It's not super obvious where you would want to play it. Well, maybe it is super obvious you want to play it in a black deck that's casting lots of enchantments. I suppose there is a scenario, because once during each of your turns you may cast an enchantment by paying life rather than paying its mana cost. So maybe you're in that niche sort of combo scenario where I just want to cast an Omniscience for free, right? I'm not playing Enchantment Tribal at all. I just have a deck where maybe I cheat my Demon of, right? I can reanimate my Demon of Fate's Design for 1 mana, and then I can cast my Omniscience paying life, right? So I'm essentially like, I mean, geez, that's a combo you could probably do on like turn 1 or 2 or 3 or something, right? Reanimate this guy, cast Omniscience for free. That is certainly a possibility. I think a lot of people might be doing that. There are some really, really powerful enchantments out there. So it is possible that this guy will be enabled for some combo potential for that reason. But likely, I think he's mostly going to be used in those enchantment tribal decks that are black, right? Also has 2 and a black, sacrifice another enchantment. Demon of Fate's Design gets +X, +0 until end of turn, where X is the sacrificed enchantment's mana value. I don't know how often you're going to be doing that. That's kind of a weird ability, because why would you want to be sacrificing your enchantments? Usually they have great abilities that you want to be using. The design is a little weird with that last ability. However, that first ability is really powerful and does have some combo potential. And obviously in any enchantment tribal deck like that, Ephemia, you know, that very janky, underwhelming commander that I did on my underwhelming commander series. Here's a great card for it. That's why I like cards like this, right? When I see a card like this, I'm like, okay, it is very niche, but at the same time, you have those underwhelming commanders that now, you know, you're in mono black enchantments. Now you got a pretty decent include for that deck. So that's why I kind of like cards like that. I mean, this is a phenomenal fit in that deck, because actually the sacrifice enchantment part works as well. So there you go. There's a good include for this guy. And you know, there's probably a lot of other decks as well, other than the precons, obviously, which is what this was made for. All right, let's talk about probably the most interesting new card that we got from this whole set, I think, which is probably Guff Rewrites History. This is a really interesting one that really takes some dissection to sort of figure out, because I was looking at this and I was like, oh, wow, that's really good. And then I was like, oh, maybe it's not. And I sort of went back and forth on it. So let's see if we can figure out whether this is actually going to become a commander staple or not. 2 and a red instant. For each player, choose target non-enchantment, non-land permanent that player controls. Those permanents owners shuffle them into their libraries. So we'll stop there. We already have what seems like a Chaos Warp type of effect. However, it's not, because first of all, you can't hit enchantments, which if I'm on a red deck, that's what makes Chaos Warp an auto include, is I can't deal with enchantments, Chaos Warp and Wild Magic Surge being the only options for dealing with enchantments. So the fact that this doesn't hit enchantments means, okay, now if I'm in a red deck, I can't deal with my opponent's Smothering Tithe, Heuristic Study, or any enchantment I really got off the... I don't love that. I don't love that. Doesn't hit lands either. So already I'm not loving it, because it is not as versatile as I would like it to see. It's for each player, and this is not a May. You have to hit a target non-enchantment, non-land permanent that player controls. A lot more going on here, though. Each player who controlled one of those permanents exiles the cards from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card, then puts the rest on the bottom of their library in random order. Each player may cast the non-land card they exiled without paying its mana cost. So again, we're doing the similar thing to the Chaos Warp, probably more similar to Wild Magic Surge. As a removal option, I don't love it. Again, I don't like the limitations there. I also don't like, I mean, you have to target yourself, right? So you have to target something that you control. Now, I know what people will say. Okay, well, this is Divergent Transformation, right? Or maybe that Polymorph effect where I use it on myself. That's where I can use it. But again, you got to use it on your opponents too, right? There is no situation where I can just use this on myself. There is no situation where I can just use this on one player. This is each player choose target non-enchantment, non-land permanent. You have to use it on everybody. Again, the Chaos Warp situation is great because I can pick anything. I can also just target the one really problematic thing on the table, and the chances they get something off of it is not great. They might get a land. I would say that's probably the most likely scenario off a Chaos Warp is they flip a land off the top, and then they might get nothing. They might also get the exact card you shuffled in, which I have seen happen a couple times. It's kind of funny. So now if I want to roll the dice and see what might happen, I have 3 opponents likely that it's not just one guy who might flip something good off the top. Now I got 3 guys that might be able to cast something for free. By the way, this is not even again, Chaos Warp is better because it only flips permanents over. If your opponent has an Expropriate on top, it doesn't do anything. Here, if your opponent flips an Expropriate or exiles it, I guess, they're going to get to cast it for free, right? If the first non-land card they exile and is Expropriate, you just let them cast it for free. The more I talk about this card, the more I don't like it. Yeah, I don't think I will ever be using this card. Definitely not a great removal option at all. How else could you use this? I don't know. I don't love it. I think probably the best new card from this set is Descendants Fury. 3 and a red enchantment. Whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you may sacrifice one of them. If you do, reveal cards from top of your library until you reveal a creature card that shares a creature type with the sacrificed creature. Put that card onto the battlefield and put the rest on the bottom of your library in random order. So again, people will look at this card and go, oh, as tribal deck, tribal themes. Nah, hold on there. Yes, you could do that, right? And certainly this is I think it's a slam dunk in like a Krenko deck where I have goblin tokens. I get in for damage and it's just a 1/1 token. So what do I care, right? I'll sacrifice it. It's 1 or more, obviously. So I'll sacrifice that 1 token and then I'll flip an actual, some goblin lord effect off of the top instead of a goblin token, right? It's just great value, right? It's sort of like Evolutionary Leap that way. Evolutionary Leap is a great card where I can just sacrifice some token that's not really doing me a whole lot of good and actually get a decent creature. But this one is actually putting it onto the battlefield, which of course is better. I also think this card's really good outside of a tribal theme, right? If you're in any deck that is doing I'll just say the Felden of the Third Path, because I can just get a creature. Like, are you going to get a creature with that type? I don't know. Maybe not. That could be the tough part. If you're in a sneak attack scenario, right? Any of those decks where I'm sacrificing my creatures anyway, I'm going to sacrifice them after combat, or I'm going to sacrifice them on the end step. Those scenarios, this might be a good include. Are you going to actually get a creature though? That's the thing. You'd have to look at the creature types in your deck to see if you would get them or not. The other scenario where I think this card is really neat is in the scenario where you only have one creature of that type. So I will use my Borborygmos and Fibblethip deck that I just talked about, where I don't know if this is necessarily a great fit, but here's an idea, right? I'll just throw in an idea of how you could use that. Borborygmos and Fibblethip is a Cyclops Homunculus, two very rare creature types in the game of Magic, of course. So it's very easy for me, right? If I'm doing humans or goblins or something, I might just get some random thing, right? Here, this is looking specifically for a creature that shares a creature type with it. So if I get in for that, I probably don't want to sacrifice my commander there, but I'm just using this as an example. I get in for damage with it, and of course now I can sacrifice it. And when I do, I'm going to flip cards off the top. I'm looking for a creature that is either a homunculus or a cyclops. Not a lot, right? So I'm only going to have that one card I'm looking for, right? This is a great way to get that one card. If I have a commander with a rare creature type, I can very easily take another creature, maybe a secret commander or something, stick it in the 99, and I'm guaranteed to get it because it's the only creature in my deck that shares a creature type with my commander, or whatever other situation you want to talk about here where that fits, right? This is looking specifically for that creature type. So for that reason, it's very easy to get that very specific creature that you want if it has a rare creature type. That's another way you can use this card. It's a very interesting one. I think it's probably my favorite new card from this set. I'll end off talking about the colorless precon, and the reason why is because that's the one precon where it is not super archetype specific. In fact, it's probably the exact opposite. I don't like it either. I don't like any of the precons. The first three are all super archetype specific, which makes it any of the new cards from those sets, you can't use that much outside of those specific archetypes. I would have liked to see a few cards that were, okay, you could just throw this, in a deck I already have that doesn't necessarily fit that archetype. The colorless one is doing the exact opposite, in my opinion, where it is just basically good stuff. It's like colorless good stuff. It's doing a whole bunch of things that really there is no theme at all with that deck. I don't know. What's the theme supposed to be for that precon? It's just colorless good stuff as far as I can tell. As you can probably tell from the face commander, Zolodok Void Gorger. Colorless spells you cast from your hand with mana value 7 or greater have Cascade. So is there a build around there? I don't think so, other than you just want to be casting colorless spells that cost mana value 7 or greater, right? Just cascading, just giving you good value. The other commander from the set, right? The commander in the 99, Omarthus, Ghostfire Initiate, XX casting cost, and it's an 0/0. Enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. So if I pay 2 mana, I get 1 counter. So 2 mana, 1/1. I like the X, right? Because of course I can get my commander out right away if I want to. I like that a lot. And you might actually want to do that because this is one of those commanders that you definitely want to be building around, and getting your commander out early when you want to build around it is, of course, really important. Whenever you put 1 or more +1/+1 counters on another colorless creature, you may put a +1/+1 counter on Omarthus. So that's an interesting one. I'll just say the thing I don't like about it, we're just doing the +1/+1 counter things again, which, okay, all right, we're doing that again, I guess. Okay, sure. I will say though, going down the rabbit hole, I always love going down the rabbit hole, looking at all those old cards, those colorless creatures that are putting counters on themselves. I think the most obvious way to go here is modular, because modular's doing that already. It's doing the +1/+1 counter theme, so you could very easily do a modular theme here. I don't love the payoff though. I mean, the payoff is you just put a +1/+1 counter on Omarthus, so you're just making your commander bigger. However, we do have another ability here that when I first read it, I was like, huh? Where did that come from? When Omarthus dies, manifest a number of cards from the top of your library equal to the number of counters on it. I was like, what? Manifest? Since when is that a colorless thing? I don't know. It's very weird that they put that on there. Again, to me, this just feels like you're just taking all these random abilities and throwing it into this colorless deck. Oh, let's do +1/+1 counters and, I don't know, manifest. Sure, we'll throw that in there. Very weird, random mix of things. None of it really working together. This commander has, as far as I can tell, nothing to do with the face commander other than the fact that they're both colorless. Really weird, a really weird mix of cards. And again, I got to a few more. They are good cards, and because they're colorless, I'll just point out, again, another reason why the colorless precon is going to be, I think, more sought after than the other ones is because they're colorless, and for that reason, of course, they can go in any deck. That's a good thing. I'm always going to rank cards higher if they're colorless because you can put them in any deck, and a lot of good stuff here, so that might be the situation. This is a weird one. How would you build this as a commander? commander? I don't know. You got the +1/+1 counter thing, and then you got the manifest, and I'm just thinking, I don't know, this is a weird one. Like the manifest is like, what? Where's that coming from? Very weird. It looks like a kind of a tough build around. Again, you could do the modular thing, sure, but again, that doesn't work either though. Okay, now we're really into a bind here, because if I'm putting a bunch of modular creatures, or creatures, typically the creatures with +1/+1 counters on them, just like your commander, have a 0/0 power toughness. If you manifest them, right, and for those who don't know how manifest works, if it's a creature, it's not exactly like Morph. If it's a creature, you pay its casting cost to flip it over, right? So we can just manifest the top cards of our library, and if they're instant sorceries, lands, they're just going to sit there, right? They're just going to be 2/2 colorless creatures. That, I guess that kind of works, but are we going to be able to flip them over? You're going to want to flip them over, right? If it's a 0/0 creature, like it's that Arcbound Ravager, if I flip it over, it has no counters on it, so it just immediately dies. So that's something you're definitely going to have to take into consideration when you're building this deck. This is a weird one. Let me know what you guys think. Definitely an interesting build around, I think, though. Let's look at Desecrate Reality, which I think is, again, another card that might be getting some buzz. 7 mana instant. For each opponent, exile up to 1 target permanent that player controls with an even mana value, and has Adamant. If at least 3 colorless mana was spent to cast this spell, return a permanent card with an odd mana value from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this card's going to get some buzz for 2 reasons. One, because it is pretty good removal, or at least it seems like it's pretty good removal, and it has that powerful recursion effect as well. And getting that all stapled on 1 card at instant speed is great. The things I like about this card, first of all, it's removal, and I always like removal, right? The other thing I like about this card is that Adamant, and I think they need to start doing this more, because it makes it so that this card, even though it's colorless, throwing it in any deck just makes it a okay removal spell. I don't even think it's a good removal spell, if I'm putting this in a 2 or 3 color deck, because I'm not gonna get the Adamant. You're gonna have 3 colorless mana? I don't know about that. Maybe you got a Arcane Lighthouse or a Field of the Dead, or, you would need those lands that tap for colorless mana in order to get that. Maybe in a monocolor deck you could do that. Even then it might be tough. I guess later in the game when you got 7 mana, maybe you will. So I like that. I like that restriction there, because without the recursion part, in my opinion, this is not a great removal spell. So because of that, they're hedging it so that you can't, it's not like a Smothering Tithe where I can just throw it in any deck that has white. Here, it's like, I really got to think about it, whether or not it's going to be worth it to put this in there. And that I like. I think they need to do that more, right? As far as the removal part goes, I saw some people getting pretty excited about this, and I don't love it, okay? So for each opponent, you're going to exile a permanent. Wow, that's great, right? For 7 mana, pretty good. Windgrace's Judgment is a card that has been around forever that I don't hardly ever see. I still use it because I think it's a phenomenal removal spell. Destroys a permanent for each of your opponents. 5 mana instant speed, way cheaper than this, and not a lot of people play it. Here you're exiling, but it has to be even mana value. Oof, I don't love that. Again, just like with the Guff rewrites history, I don't love that restriction. It is going to feel really bad if my opponent has a Rhystic Study on the table and I'm casting this and I'm going to hit, I'm going to exile. Maybe I'll get a Smothering Tithe. Maybe I'll get my opponent's commander if it's an Atraxa, something even mana value. And then that third guy's got that Rhystic Study, and I so badly want to get it off the table. And I'm just thinking, if I had a Windgrace's Judgment, I could. But with this card, I cannot. That, to me, I don't love that. That just is really a feel bad moment. And it's going to be an even more feel bad moment if I don't get the recursion as well, right? 7 mana is a lot. 7 mana instant speed is Cyclonic Rift, guys. Just keep that in mind, right? Game-ending things happen at 7 mana, right? Now, in a colorless deck, great. I think this is absolutely an auto-include because, of course, in a colorless deck, you're already pigeonholed on the removal that you can put in there, right? You can't play a Windgrace's Judgment, so of course you're going to play this. Absolutely, without a doubt. I don't want to put people off of it. If you're in a colorless deck, for sure, this is a guarantee because it's pretty good as a removal spell. I don't know if it's the best colorless removal option. It's not, but it's a good one. And also you're going to guaranteed get the recursion there, which of course is great. It's getting any permanent. Outside of that though, I don't know if I would play it. I don't know if I would play this card outside of a colorless deck. Let's talk about Obtrusarchaic, the card that I think might see the most play in the format outside of course, the reprints. If we're talking about the new cards from this set, this is the one that I think might fit in the most decks, maybe. 4 mana Avatar 3/4 with Vigilance. So, of course, it's colorless. It can go in any deck. Pay 1 and tap. Copy target activated or triggered ability you control from a colorless source. you may choose new targets for the copy. So it's got to be a colorless source. And I know people will see that and go, oh, it's only colorless. So you can't use it on your commander, right? Unless you're in a colorless deck. Again, in a colorless deck, this is probably an auto include, I would imagine, because it's going to hit any activated or triggered ability in your entire deck, which is amazing. You know, even Evolving Wilds, right? Just so people know, right? Evolving Wilds is an activated ability. Go check out my video where I talk about what activated or triggered abilities are. That covers a lot. So I have an Evolving Wild. I don't know if you would play Evolving Wilds in a colorless deck. I don't have one, but I have an Evolving Wilds. I can copy that and now go get 2 wastes out of my deck and put them directly into play. That's pretty darn good. 1 mana and tap this guy. Of course, mana abilities can't be targeted because mana abilities don't use the stack. So we can't be targeting any of our mana rocks here. However, there's a bunch of really, really, really great stuff just off the top of my head. I don't know. Hedron Archive, right? I pay 2, sacrifice it to draw 2 cards. Now I can pay an extra 1 and draw 2 more cards. That is a colorless source with an activated ability. I got a Staffin' In. It draws me an extra card on my upkeep. That's a triggered ability. Again, triggered abilities when, whenever, and at. That covers a lot. So now I get to pay 1 and draw another card. That seems pretty good. Maybe I got that Moon Silver Key. That's a great run. I would imagine Moon Silver Key is probably an auto-include in every colorless deck. Again, doesn't have to be a colorless deck here. That's just another card that I'm thinking, great activated ability from a colorless source. I can copy that, go get something else out of my deck. How many cards are there in the Commander format that this is going to hit? There's a lot. Obviously, the artifacts is probably the big one. There's a lot of lands out there, I think, too. Again, I'll throw Field of the Dead out there. Field of the Dead, that's a triggered ability. I have a land enter the battlefield. Again, we're going outside of a colorless deck here now. Colorless deck, probably an auto-include. Outside of a colorless deck, Field of the Dead, enters the battlefield. That's a triggered ability from a colorless source. I can create another zombie. That's one you could definitely use. I just talked about Thawing Glaciers, right? That's a colorless source, activated ability. Now I can pay 1, go get a basic land, copy it, go get another basic land. So there's lots of ways to use this card. That's why, you know, it might take a while before it sort of people start to figure out, oh, hey, I could use it for this. I could use it for that. I think this is likely going to be the most used card from this new card from this set in the Commander format, probably. Let's talk about Rise of the Eldrazi, which I'm sure is getting a lot of buzz, and maybe it shouldn't. So 9 and 3 colorless mana, so 12 mana. Okay, 12 mana, and 3 of them have to be colorless. So again, I don't know if you would play this outside of a colorless deck. I don't think you would. Again, maybe in a monocolor deck, you would have enough of those lands, you know, like a Ghost Quarter or something like that, that produce the colorless mana that you need for this. Maybe. Again, 12 mana. It's going to be cast way later in the game, so it's more likely that that will happen. I don't think I would ever play this outside of a colorless deck. And honestly, I don't know if I would ever play this card because I honestly don't think it's that great. So a 12 mana sorcery. This spell can't be countered. Thank goodness for that, right? This card would be almost unplayable if someone could just counter it. 12 mana is a lot. Destroy target permanent. Target player draws 4 cards, take an extra turn after this one, and then you have to exile it. So, of course, you can't be getting into any shenanigans here. I think every extra turn spell should have the exile effect on it. 12 mana should end the game in the Commander format, right? I mean, Tooth and Nail Entwined. How much does that cost? Like 9 or 10 or something, right? 12 mana should end the game. This does not. Not by a long shot. In fact, I'm actually surprised how little this does. When I first saw this, I'm like, oh, here we go. The big, dumb, colorless Eldrazi spell that's gonna, you know, all is dust, in my opinion. That only costs 7 mana and is probably more of a swing in a game. Like, All of Dust is a massive swing in a game. Ugin, the Spirit Dragon, 8 mana, massive swing. Whenever I see an Ugin come down, I'm like, oh, here we go. It's usually a massive, huge advantage for the person playing it. This is like, destroy a permanent, just 1? I mean, you get the best permanent on the board, unless it has hexproof or indestructible. I'm actually even surprised this is an exile target permanent. That even would be okay. Drawing 4 cards is just okay. I mean, that's not even that great. Like if you said, I'm making a spell that destroys a permanent, draws you 4 cards, and takes an extra turn, I would probably say 10 mana is enough for that. Like this actually, you know, I don't love cards like this, but I'm thinking this ain't that great. It's not. If I was making a colorless deck, I don't think I would find room for this. It's likely that I will never be able to cast it. Maybe I never get to 12 mana, right? Even with all the mana rocks and stuff. I mean, maybe with the mana rocks, but then someone casts a Vandal Blast and I'm SOL, right? I know people will say, hey, Eureka, there's a great, any really expensive card there's going to be other uses for it. Like in that Eureka deck, just because I'm not going to actually cast it. I'm going to just hit my opponents for a bunch of damage. Or in the scenario where, of course, again, Omniscience or any scenario where I can cast it for free. It gets better if you don't have, like, how often are people going to actually pay for this? It certainly gets a lot better if you don't actually have to pay the casting cost, which would be the case with the other card from this precon, Darksteel Monolith, which again is probably another card that's going to get a lot of buzz. 8 mana artifact and it's indestructible. So again, if I got, it's Darksteel, so of course it's got to be, but if I got an 8 mana artifact, kind of nice that it doesn't get removed right away. So indestructible is nice. Once each turn, you may pay 0 rather than pay the mana cost for a colorless spell you cast from your hand. So again, just like Darksteel Forge goes in every artifact deck, Darksteel Monolith is probably going to go in every colorless deck. And, just like with that, the enchantment guy that you can cast your enchantments for free, there is situations where you can get away from that. Once during each of your turns, you can pay 0 for that colorless spell. So this doesn't necessarily have to be in a colorless deck. This can be in an artifact deck, right? Again, I can cast that Darksteel Forge for free in my artifact deck, right? Just once per turn. It doesn't have to be something that costs a zillion mana. Of course, I can cast that Rise of the Eldrazi for 0. And of course, you can do it right away, right? I can play my Darksteel Monolith for 8 mana and then immediately this ability turns on and I can follow it up by casting that Rise of the Eldrazi for free. How often is that going to happen? That's sort of like the Dreamland scenario. I don't think it's going to happen a lot. And to be quite honest, I can think of better colorless spells. Again, the Rise of the Eldrazi, I'm like, doesn't really blow me away. I would much rather cast this and then follow it up with All Is Dust or Ugin or I can think of better colorless options. Darksteel Forge, right? There's a lot of really powerful colorless spells out there that you could be casting. Certainly this is going to go in those colorless decks. I would imagine it can easily fit in any colorless deck. You don't have to cast a massive spell for free. You can just cast your Arcane Signet for free, right? That's a colorless spell. And for that reason, this card probably will go in a lot of other decks as well. Any deck where you have a lot of colorless cards, artifact themes, probably a lot, maybe is it worth it to put in like maybe an equipment deck? Because 99% of your equipment are going to be colorless. I don't know. This is another card where it's like, okay, colorless decks for sure. Outside of that, I guess we'll see. It certainly is going to see play in the format. It's an interesting card. People love casting stuff for free, so it's certainly going to see play, no doubt. Again, for me, I wasn't super excited about a lot of this stuff, and I will just say, okay, going over my overview of this, I wasn't super impressed with a lot of the commanders. None of them I'm really excited about building a deck around. The new cards for the 99, not really excited about any of those. The reprints were okay. The fact that this set costs more than most other sets is making matters even worse. My overall evaluation though, right, again, just on a personal level, if I was telling people to run out and buy these cards, I would say, I don't know about that. I don't know if I would. I don't know if it's worth it, especially at the higher price point. For me personally, I'll just give my personal take on this. This is a set that I might not buy a single card from, which is shocking, okay? Especially because it's a commander set. I only play commander. That's the only format I play. It's the only format I've been playing for years. I can't remember the last time a set came out where I didn't get at least one card, right? Again, just ordering a single online, like I usually do. I just got a bunch of cards from Lord of the Rings. I got cards from Aftermath. Before that, right, March of the Machine, got a few cards from that. Phyrexia All Will Be One, got a few cards for that, right? I see the cards that fit in the decks that I have. That's how I typically do it. I don't buy boxes. I don't buy those booster packs or anything like that. That's just not my thing. Like sometimes I'll just buy cards that I think are really good cards that I might use sometime in the future if I'm not using them currently. But typically I look through all the cards and see the ones that I want to use in my decks, and I'm not seeing any. There is not a single card. I could easily not buy a single card from this set. Like I said, that Obscuring Haze looks pretty cool. I might buy it just because it's really cool. That's it. I'm certainly not going to be buying any boxes or booster packs or anything like that. And I might not buy any singles. I don't think there is a single card from this set that I actually want for any of my decks. As far as evaluation goes of a commander set, for someone that plays commander and nothing else, that's pretty damning as far as I'm concerned. So, You guys let me know. Are you going to buy boxes, boosters, singles? Are there any cards? Like, what are specifically the cards, right? Is there a specific card? If you have any of those archetypes, like I said, if you have Enchantment Tribal in those specific colors, again, if you got a Bant Enchantment Tribal deck or something, you might have a little tough time getting certain cards here. If you have a Planeswalker deck, you know, probably there's a few cards that you might want to grab. But if you're outside of those archetypes, you might have a tough time finding any cards that you want from this set. You guys let me know in the comments below if there's any cards that you're really excited about, or if you're really excited about this set at all. That is it for today, though, and thanks for tuning in.